headlines. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un writes letters to a former South Korean First Lady and Hyundai Group's chairwoman, thanking them for their condolences over his late father and vowing to do his best for a Korean unification. Investigators say multiple IP addresses based in China were used in the recent cyber attack on nuclear reactors in South Korea. The hacker is threatening more information leaks if authorities do not shut down 3 reactors by Christmas. And Christmas is here, but celebrations seem muted in terms of holiday spending. The latest consumer sentiment index dips to a 15-month low. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Tae-ri. A South Korean delegation made a trip to the Inter-Korean Industrial Complex on this Wednesday, and they came back with something very special. Letters from the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
North Korea says it will show positive efforts to move towards unification of the Korean peninsula. The message came in a form of letters from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which were passed on to the delegations before they crossed back over the border to South Korea this Wednesday afternoon. One was addressed to Lee Ho, the widow of late President Kim Dae-jung, and another to Hyundai Group chairwoman Kim Jongun. In their respective letters, the communist leader thanked both the former First Lady and Hyun for the condolences on the 3rd anniversary of his father Kim Jong-il's death earlier this month. He also told the two women that they would be welcomed back next year for a visit to Pyongyang. The two groups that traveled to the north for the one-day visit have special ties with Pyongyang. Lee and her late husband, former President Kim Dae-jung, held the first ever Inter-Korean summit in 2000, while Hyundai Asan chairwoman Hyun's group ran a joint tour program to the North's Mount Kungang resort until it was suspended in 2008. The letters were delivered by Kim Jongun, North Korea's top official in charge of South Korean affairs, who reportedly said he hoped for improved inter-Korean relations during the exchange. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
A couple of small theaters in the U.S. say they are willing to screen the movie The Interview. Sony Pictures was more than happy to take them up on the offer, but the country's biggest movie chains are still reluctant. Ji Myung-gil has more.
In what some are calling a victory for Hollywood, Sony Pictures says it is now going to release The Interview, a comedy film which depicts the fictional assassination of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in some U.S. theaters after all. In a statement, the studio's chief executive Michael Linton said they had never given up on releasing the movie and that they were excited it will be shown in a number of theaters from Christmas Day. One of the stars of the movie, Seth Rogen, tweeted that the people had spoken and freedom had prevailed. The New York Times reports that the biggest theater chains in the U.S. are still unlikely to screen the film, but Sony will likely be able to patch together distribution in 200 to 300 smaller independent theaters. Representatives from the 4 largest theater chains in the U.S. have declined to comment, only saying that negotiations over the film's release were ongoing. A week ago, Sony scrapped the release of its $44 million film after their systems were hacked and threats were made against U.S. movie theater chains. The cyber attack was blamed on North Korea, and the threats of violence caused major chains to pull the film due to security concerns. The Interview has been at the center of escalating tensions between the U.S. and North Korea, with Pyongyang denying it has anything to do with the attack. The White House said President Barack Obama welcomed Sony's decision, as America is a country that believes in free speech. He had earlier criticized Sony's initial decision to cancel the release. Sony Pictures says it will continue to secure more platforms and more theaters so the movie reaches the largest possible audience in the U.S. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
A U.S.-based research group says North Korea's internet connection was partially down again on Wednesday, Korea time. That comes a day after internet access was totally blocked for some 10 hours in the regime. A clear answer on who and what may have caused the outage is not known yet, but what's clear is that the U.S. is not saying much about its possible involvement. Our Shin Se-min tells us more.
The U.S. State Department is sidestepping questions on whether the U.S. had a hand in North Korea's internet outage on Monday. Spokesperson Marie Harf told reporters that there was no new information to share about the issue, but added that U.S. President Barack Obama had spoken about the potential responses separate and apart from what we've seen over the past 24 hours, and that it was up to North Korea to address the state of their internet. Tuesday's press briefing came a day after Harf indicated that not all U.S. responses to the hacking would be immediately evident. President Obama repeatedly vowed of a proportional response to what he called the cyber vandalism on Sony. The U.S. is reportedly weighing a new round of financial sanctions on Pyongyang that would target the banks and trading companies used by leader Kim Jong-un and other North Korean officials. The U.S. is also reviewing whether to put North Korea back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism. However, such measures would largely be symbolic. North Korea is already among the most heavily sanctioned countries on earth, and Harf said there wouldn't be a large practical effect of additional sanctions. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, authorities looking into who is leaking documents from South Korea's nuclear power plant operators say it does not appear to be a one-man job. They now have a better idea of where this attack may have originated. Our Kim has the details.
The investigation team is closing in on the hacker who is threatening to release thousands of nuclear reactor data. Authorities say they've tracked the attack to multiple IP addresses in Shenyang, China. And they haven't ruled out North Korea's involvement since the city is close to the border. Authorities believe the attack was planned for 2 years and that more than one person is responsible. They had discovered earlier in the week that the Twitter ID being used by the hacker was registered in the U.S. South Korea has asked both Beijing and Washington for assistance in their probe. The group of hackers has leaked documents on 5 separate occasions over the last week. The most recent was on Tuesday, which included crucial information about nuclear technology. They've threatened to release tens of thousands of additional documents related to the nation's nuclear reactors and destroy control systems if their demands are not met. Those demands? Halt operations at 3 of Korea's nuclear facilities by Christmas Day or face the consequences. And experts say such a leak could be detrimental.
The hackers say they have about 100,000 pieces of data. Even if that data is not highly classified, it can be reassembled, creating a huge chunk of new information. Then it becomes very dangerous.
And in response to the recent security breach, the Energy Ministry conducted a 2-day-long cybersecurity drill this week on all of Korea's nuclear facilities. The network security of power plants was reviewed, as was protocol for shutting them down in the case of a malfunction. The Energy Ministry raised its alert level against cyber attacks 1 notch to the 3rd highest level of caution on Tuesday. Kim, ARIRANG News.
The history of Christmas in Korea is not as long as many would think. It was first introduced around 1880 and during the 70s and 60s, that is, while Korea was under a strict curfew. The only days to have the curfew lifted were Christmas Eve and Christmas. So the international holiday spread quickly through Korea's history, and over the course of 130 years or so, Christmas has taken on many different forms. Our Imuni has this special holiday report with a look at a very special festival.
So, what does Christmas of the 21st century look like? Well, it's become more festive and more merry than ever before. To alleviate some of the stress and hardship of 2014, Saedaemun has created something very special. a street dedicated entirely to a Christmas street festival. They've blocked the roads and decked the halls to spread the Christmas cheer. And it's not every day you can hug Santa, or many Santas for that matter, each eagerly waiting to warm the spirits of all with their free hugs. From coloring ceramic figurines with your family, to making hand-punched and printed Christmas cards with friends, a row of festive do-it-yourself booths await to entertain those passing by. And of course, Christmas wouldn't be the same without a tray of Santa's favorite cookies. Each dollop of frosting and ornate decoration precisely placed by hand. Because Rudolph once told me that Santa likes his cookies homemade. Once the sun goes down, the party isn't over. Bright lights and twinkling stars ignite the skies. Christmas is definitely in the air. But as this is a festival of a rather special nature, you can't forget the music. And it doesn't always need to be all prim and proper. These musicians are here with a rock and roll of a good time for an audience ready to dance the night away. Even though December means freezing temperatures outside, the cold doesn't stop these people, warm with the Christmas spirit. Under a festive night sky, it's time to jingle all the way, because this year, there's a Merry Merry Christmas waiting for you. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
So yes, Christmas is here in Korea as well, but the Christmas mood seems somewhat subdued, even more this year. That is, in terms of holiday spending and festivities. This is not so much of news, given that consumer sentiment in Korea has not been so strong this year. The December Consumer Sentiment Index was another data point that supports that story. Our Kwon-soo explains.
Korean consumers are not feeling too good at the moment, with the nation's consumer sentiment hitting a 15-month low in December. The Bank of Korea says its consumer sentiment index stood at 102, falling 0.1 point to drop for the third straight month. Although the reading is slightly above 100, indicating optimists outnumber pessimists, it was lower compared to May, right after the Sewol ferry disaster, which dampened consumption countrywide. Experts say that to tackle sluggish domestic demand, more needs to be done to raise consumer confidence, so businesses are encouraged to invest. The government's monetary policies seem to have improved conditions in August and September, but despite another rate cut in October, things are worsening, raising concerns that planned structural reforms may not have been that effective.
When interest rates fall, typically we want people to borrow more, to consume more, buy more housing or invest more. But because we have such a high debt for households, they're not really borrowing that much to spend. So that path toward higher consumption and higher investment is very weak right now.
The central bank says external factors such as falling international oil prices and Russia's currency crisis are also dragging on Koreans' consumer sentiment. Kwon-soo, ARIRANG News.
And Korea's service sector not looking so good either, hitting its lowest point since the 2008 global financial crisis. Statistics Korea says revenue for this sector stood at some $1.3 trillion last year, up just 0.8% from the previous year. That growth rate is far lower than the average annual growth rate of some 6.5% from 2008 to 2013. Experts say a slump in the manufacturing last year trickled into the wholesale and retail sectors. Low consumer spending also played a part in this dip. There are over 2.6 million small service businesses in Korea and over 10 million people working in this industry. Meanwhile, the Bank of Korea says it will continue with its monetary easing policies next year to inject more capital into markets. Taking the country's slow recovery into account, the central bank says it's preparing to revise the government's inflation target level for the time being for the time period starting in 2016. The current inflation rate has been in the 1% range since November 2012. That's far below the government's target range of 2.5% to 3.5%. U.S. Congressman Mike Honda is known for his activities dedicated to resolving Japan's wartime sexual enslavement issue. And he had this to say about what it's like to be talking to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe about this topic. It's a waste of time. So what is the alternative? Our Hwang Sung-hee tells us more.
Representative Mike Honda says it would be a waste of energy and time to put pressure on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe about Japan's wartime sexual slavery because he has no interest in resolving the issue. In an interview with Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency, Honda said South Korea and the United States should increase pressure at the grassroots level and make them understand that this is a necessity for Japan to do in order to become fully accepted. Honda added the Japanese population over the last 2.5 generations has been ignorant about the country's wartime crimes since their government has not been teaching children about it. The congressman recently made a 5-day visit to Korea and met with some of the surviving former sex slaves as well as President Park Geun-hye. Honda played a leading role raising U.S. awareness about the issue, including making House Resolution 121, which urges Japan to formally acknowledge, apologize, and accept historical responsibility into a law. Saying that time is running out for the elderly victims, Honda said he's open to taking fresh action in Congress. But Honda said it is time for the White House and the State Department to turn up the heat and turn the screws on Japan for a sincere apology. However, with his landslide victory in recent snap elections, experts expect Abe to walk a clear path of an ultra-right-wing leader who wants to see Japan restored to what he believes was its wartime greatness. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Islamic State militants say they're preparing for the world's largest religious cleansing by murder. That's according to the first ever Western journalist who is granted extensive access to this jihadist group. And to tell us more, Paul Lee is joining us. Paul, this veteran reporter recently spent 10 days in IS-controlled areas in Syria and Iraq. What did he discover?
Well, in this rare glimpse into the inner workings of the Islamic State, Jürgen Totenhofer said these fanatic religious followers still maintain a brutal grip on power in the region. Renowned German reporter had actively sought out the militants through months of secret negotiations. After safely returning home, he warned that IS is stronger and much more dangerous than Western leaders realize. Our Connie Lee reports.
The first ever Western journalist to have direct access to the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq has returned with a strong warning about the militant group.
Has the power of a nuclear tsunami. It's incredible. I was so amazed. I couldn't understand this enthusiasm.
In an interview with ABC News and BBC Radio, the 74-year-old German journalist who traveled with the militants through territories they control says their official philosophy was brutal religious cleansing.
We will conquer Europe someday. We will for sure. We'll kill 150 million, 200 million, 500 million.
The journalist describes how he saw hundreds of fighters from all over the world arriving in IS territories each day to join the group. He says he's pessimistic that any Western country will be able to stop them. The inside look comes on the heels of a report from Amnesty International, which shows the horrifying reality that women and girls face under the Islamic State. The report says hundreds of women, especially from the Yazidi tribe, are tortured, sexually assaulted, and that girls even younger than 14 years old are held as sex slaves.
I am hungry, but it's better than getting sexually assaulted. I can take it all, but I just can't bear the thought of young girls being raped.
Across Syria and Iraq, in the midst of rubble and destroyed buildings, are the tens of thousands of Yazidi refugees who have fled the violence of the militants. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And turning to the U.S., a fresh government report shows the world's largest economy has expanded at its fastest pace in over a decade. So what does this mean for the U.S. economy moving forward?
Well, experts say it will help the country's economic growth rate through 2015 on the back of rising consumer and business spending. The strong figures have also strengthened investor sentiment, pushing major indices on the U.S. stock market to new record highs. Our Kim Jongun tells us more.
The world's largest economy grew at an annual rate of 5% during the July to September period, the fastest rate of expansion since 2003 and higher than the government's earlier estimate of 3.9%. Economists point to strong consumption, especially on healthcare services. Consumer spending jumped 3.2%, its biggest jump this year.
Two-thirds of the U.S. economy is related to consumption. And history would suggest that business investment lags consumption or lags economic growth. So if the overall economy is starting to accelerate, then 2015 could also be a fairly strong business investment climate.
The data boosted stocks on Wall Street, lifting the Dow Jones above 18,000 for the first time ever. The S&P 500 also closed at a record high. Growth projections in the fourth quarter are expected to record an annual rate of around 2.5% and 3% next year, putting weight that the U.S. Federal Reserve will stay on course and starts raising interest rates by mid-2015. Boosted by the strengthening labor market and falling oil prices, consumer outlays are expected to help cushion the U.S. economy from uncertainties in China and the Eurozone and a recession in Japan. Kim Jong, ARIRANG News.
And staying in the U.S., we talked about the Christmas spirit here in Korea. And with those falling oil prices and boosting the economy, maybe leading to a rising number of Americans traveling, too, in order to celebrate this holiday season with family and friends.
That's right. Rain or shine, millions of U.S. travelers are determined to make it home for the holidays this year, putting a considerable burden on airports across the country. According to the American Automobile Association, or AAA, air travel in the States is expected to jump 1% from last year. That means nearly 6 million passengers will be taking to the skies this Christmas week. Despite the long lines, travelers say there's no place like home.
I don't like crowds that much, but we'll be okay. Where we're going is worth the effort.
It might be because the economy is getting a little bit better, and also because the airlines provide a lot of good deals and people are taking advantage of them, I think.
Weather officials are warning of severe delays, though, due to a large storm system packing high winds and heavy rain forecast to sweep the eastern half of the U.S. Nearly 99 million Americans, whether it be on the road, train, or sky, will travel more than 80 kilometers, up 4% on year.
And it's not just in the U.S. This holiday spirit is spreading across the globe on this Christmas Eve. And of course, each country has their own take on the festive traditions, especially Santa Claus. And it looks like Thailand, Paul, is bringing jolly old Saint Nick to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's definitely not your traditional Kris Kringle, but I'm sure Mrs. Claus would approve. Volunteers took to the streets in Thailand's central province on this Christmas Eve to distribute presents and joy to children of all ages, this time with the help of elephants. Donning the iconic costumes and white beard, the group of elephants made a surprise visit to schools in order to pass out toys and snacks with their trunks.
I think the children today were very excited to see the elephants dressed as Santa Claus. I think it's very special. Santa Claus is part of, elephants are part of Thai culture, and I think we've brought a little bit of Christmas to Thailand.
Organizers say the Christmas campaign event was well received with crowds of cheering fans. One of the students, 10-year-old Kanokwan Sompan, said he believes Santa Claus was real despite that long trip from the North Pole. Jenny?
A little overdressed, I think, because it's not that cold in Thailand, right? Anyways, a Merry Christmas, Paul, and to our viewers as well. And let's leave it there for now, and we'll see you again in just about 2 hours. And that wraps up this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas, everyone.